talk about our projects that focus on interpersonal skill development in adult education. This project is a key action to innovation, focusing on creating intellectual output. So the idea was born under another project that was funded by NURPlus, where we went through 4 countries and then if I spent 5 days within organization working to integrate mostly migrants and refugees. Because within this institution, people for over 18 until 65, they kind of got the same institution, either to learn the language, either to integration program when it comes to that area. So I'm going to use we. When I use we, I mean we who create this tool, the people that used to create this idea that we use into the project. It's not we on the meeting, so to make a differentiation there. So when you found out that mostly people as refugee or as migrant, when they come to Norway, they are more told that should fit into the cultural aspect of Norway. But we try to identify who is a refugee. And when they come to Norway, they come with different experiences. And those experiences are never taken into account. Some come as engineers, as doctors, as government officers, some come as a student. But when they portray them as refugee, they try to minimize and take away that experience. So which means they design a program without consulting them, without asking them, try to see their needs. So in many cases, we found out that most adult learners, they feel frustrated, but they have to do it because it's part of the introduction program. They have to do that. So in many cases, they take some classes that they don't need to take, but because it's mandatory. So the program does not fit their needs. So then you try to ask them, what do they think as having an inclusive and diverse learning environment? For them, they say, okay, it's not enough that we come from different countries as refugees and put us in the same classroom and then think that you're creating diversity. It goes beyond that. We need to communicate. We need to understand how other people maybe portray gender, maybe portray their cultural aspect, so that when I'm communicating with someone who comes from a Muslim country, and they come from a Catholic country, and maybe I come from a country where gay, lesbian, can express themselves, we try to communicate and don't feel that we're offending one another. So we found that within our capacity as the partners, there was a lack of some skills that we do not have. How can we design a training program that reflects on those needs? So that when you find out we lack interpersonal skills. So then in the next, we seek out to do research. And after research, design training program that we can use. And after that, create an assessment tool that's going to be an online assessment tool. And after that, create a guide on promoting interpersonal skill development through blogging as a tool to use also social media to do that. So we found that the first step in creating a program on diversity, inclusion, and gender sensitive, we need to understand the cultural context. We need to understand the barrier that are affecting learners. We need also to assess whether as youth worker, as facilitators, as educators, do we have the required interpersonal skills? So the conclusion was that we did not have them, because that's something we never learned from education or from different aspects of life. So then we say, okay, how can we argue that this project can be funded? We say before integrating interpersonal skill, that was a need. Then we said, how should we define interpersonal skills? That was another challenge for us. So we went beyond trying to say, because in many cases, interpersonal skill or soft skills has been defined in a certain way, but there's no common understanding what should be interpersonal skill in the labor market, for example, because when people comes as refugee, that you should be able to communicate, you should be able to do that. But I never learned how to communicate in a better way. And I don't know, people tell you should understand other people's emotion, you should have empathy, but I never learn about those things. I don't know what they are. So how can I do them? Because the goal by interpersonal skill development, we try to make sure that adult learners can have access to the labor market in a safer and inclusive way. Then we say, where should we start? So they always say we need to do a research. We need to understand among adult educators the knowledge gap that they have and the existing knowledge that they have. So this is where we started. And then today I'm going to take you through a process we use doing this research and the activities that we use to collect the data from the adult educators. Yeah, we are 6 countries that participate in the project, and then go step by step on each activity, because I was hoping to do an activity, but it's not possible because at least one activity lasts maybe 90 minutes. So it will not be feasible to do it today, unfortunately, when it comes to that. So now I'm going to go down. As you can see my screen, we use a research method that called open-ended consultation. And then what is open-ended consultation? Open-ended consultation is an approach, a research method that we use in our project, because I believe that in order to design a project, mostly educational programs, we need to do a need assessment. We need to ask the people we're going to deliver the training to understand their needs, their knowledge gaps, in order to design a training that reflects their own needs and try to not repeat what they know, maybe focus on what they would like to know to achieve the change that they want on community level or national level. So open-ended consultations are workshop activities, and we divide them into 3 workshops. So the aim of open-ended consultation is to voice the needs, the priority, the concerns, the gap of a particular target group before delivering any educational intervention. So which means this is mostly a need assessment tool. People can use, in research, people can do interviews, people can do focus groups, people can do survey, but for us, we focus on open-ended consultations. So it have to be in a group. So what makes different from a focus group? Because open-ended consultations has a particular activity that should be defined from before, and they should have a goal, they should have objective. And then at the end of open-ended consultation, they have to be a position paper, which means the participant need to come up with the needs, what they want, and what they think they know, and voice them in a position. They have to say, this is what we know, this is what we don't know, this is what we would like to know. So that's what makes open-ended consultation interesting at the end when you try to do that. The good thing is that we bring together 20 people in one room in one day, and after that one day, we have enough data because we use 20 other educators from 6 countries. So basically, we reach out to 120 people in one day per partner, not in many times, because if you do research, then you do interview, and then you have to visit 20 people. But opening the consultation, bring those 20 people in one day, and then you ask the educator, okay, can you give me your one day? And then when you ask them that it's possible to give you one day, and then you bring them together, and then you conduct an open-ended consultation. So, and then key issue when you're designing an open-ended consultation, what does the first need to know from the participant? That is very important, because before the partner delivers this research, we have to train them as well how to do that. So the most important is, what do I want to get from the participant? That's very important. How should the consultation look like with the workshop planning activity? So which means we need to define the learning activity that we're going to use, and we're going to get on them later on. And then the other thing, what needed resources to correct input from the participant, which means you need to create data correction sheets that can be used by the participant. Another issue is setting clear goal and objective. So the participant, they know exactly what they're doing there and what they're going to come up with. and why you want them to be there, because they're spending their time trying to share something with you. And then it has to be specific, it has to be clear, so that in the end, we have compelling research data. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is compressing inputs to produce a training manual to respond to express needs. Because in the end of the day, if these 20 participants come in my workshop and they say, okay, this is what we need, they're expecting for me to go back to them. If I do not go back to them, and then that was not ideal, why do I ask them in the first place? So once we finish, because now we're designing a training manual, and then we're going to go back to them and bring them together and then provide the training to them. But the training is going to focus on what they say they are not particularly familiar with. So, and they're going to be eager to participate, and they're also going to be eager to spread that to other maybe education institutions in their area when it comes to that. They have to be characteristic of the open-ended consultations. It have to be interactive participation. They have to be learning approach and activities. They have to be defined from before, and then you can start organizing open-ended consultations. The key factor limiting participation in certain process, is the challenge of social issue and the problem that people have. Because if you're doing this in Norway and they're doing this in Latvia, we are going to have different approaches, because the Norwegian cultural perspective and it's different, even though we're using the same and exactly tool. So we need to look into those aspects as well. And then from an open-ended concept or training process. So the goal of open-ended consultation basically that we did was to make sure that at the end, you're going to come up with a training manual that you can use afterwards. So that was the goal. In order to design a training manual, we need to understand who we are reaching out to, their needs, and their desired change after the training program. So that was one aspect. So then the first thing that we did is setting the goal. The goal was to send other educators and their organization to integrate interpersonal skill in adult program. So that was the goal, and that's still the goal for projects. So setting the objective, we have 5 objectives, but I come back on them later. Basically, the first one is to allow youth educators to express the needs, skill, attitude, and competence they have in the field of interpersonal skill development and adult education. So the other part was also to ask them, can you please tell us the challenge that you face or limits you when you're working with young people or adult learners to improve their interpersonal skills? So that we asked them, we try to see what the competence that we would like to develop in order to transfer interpersonal skills to adult learner. So the fourth question was to try to ask them, so based on what you know and what would you like to know, what are your gaps? We try to assess that, because that was maybe question number 4 is the most important question. We come on back afterwards. Then actually the goal and objective learning activity of a program that meets learning needs. So, and then in their own words, we ask them, if you're going to design a training program for you on interpersonal skill, what should be the goal? What should be the objective? And which learning activity would you be eager to participate in? So they give us the content, and then we try to put them together in that case. So the factor to consider as well, we need to prepare the facilitators, and we need to also be understanding, and we need also to be able to speak in order that people listen. Basically, these are the tips for facilitating and open-ended consultation. So now we're going into the practical aspect of an open-ended consultation. How do we start it? Because it's a one-day event, and it needs to have a program, it needs to have an agenda, and activity need to be predefined so that everyone can know what they're doing. So the first thing that we kind of agree on is that starting, we need to introduce ourselves as the trainers or as the facilitators through an arousing presentation. It's basically an introduction to get to know the trainers or the facilitator before you engage with that. So there is purpose, there is also audience. Everything has been outlined here. I will not go through that. Try to go through the specifics. So then getting acquaintance with the end expectations, because it's good to be honest with the people and tell them this is what's going to happen, and the logistics is this, and break is structured like this, and then because there are people that took break from their work, so they need everything to be concise and clear. So the second is making ground rule, because now we're going to work with interpersonal skills. And of course, we knew that most of what we're going to focus on maybe on emotional intelligence, focus on maybe on gender sensitivity, focus on cultural differences. So it was important to tell them they have to be confidentiality. Everything said in this room, stay in that room. Even if you go on a break, you cannot tell someone, why did you say that? It should be there. There have to be communication. We need to listen to one another and be able to respond to what people are saying, and cultural diversity, because there are people coming from different backgrounds, because they are working with the adults. There are people from refugee backgrounds, migrant background, and origin background. So when you bring those people together, then you're creating cultural diversity, and then we need to understand that we respect that. And also gender diverse as well, because there are people with different genders as well, in that sense. So this is what the trainer do in the morning, and then in the end tell the participants what should they do. They need to have someone to take the notes. They need to have someone to, a timekeeper. Also, they need someone who's going to present when it's applicable, because at the end of the day, each group, because there were 20 people in 4 groups, each group presented their position paper, what they found out, and then in the end we discussed those things. So here it's the length, the timing, and the advantage of using this approach as well. Everything is here. So now the second activity was getting to know each other as the participant. So, and then getting to know each other before the trainer introduce themselves, but now we want to make sure that the 20 people in the room, they understand each other before they can start. So we use the activity that called human billboard on the line of experience. So a human billboard, how we use it in our training program, we take a flip chart and they give to the participant. And you ask the participant to use, and you give them end marks as well. We ask each participant to use that flip chart to describe who they are, either using words, using arts, using drawing. And then when they finish, we tell them, and then wear it. You can create an X and then a wear it. You can wear it as a skirt. People come up with different ways to present their flip chart. So then we give them time to fill that. And then after that, when they finish, we tell them, okay, stay in your position. And then once they finish doing that, then you ask them, go around the room maybe for 20 minutes, tell other people what your billboard say about you. So this, they say what they want to say and they stay in their comfort zone. If they want to talk about their gender identity, they draw it and they express that. And then we let it flow for 20 minutes. They understand each other and then they know each other. The second sub-activity is the line of experience. And then we hand out an A4 page to each participant, and you ask them to divide it into 4 areas. So we show them how to do it. It's basically 2 line vertical and horizontal line, and then have 4 sections. In section A, they put their name and identify as either male, female, or queer or trans. It doesn't matter what they want. And on where they mark B, they say my occupation and my organization or school, so that we know where they come from. Then on C, they say one special joy in their life they wish to share with others. And then on D, or one of their key moments as well. So then they put that on one paper. And then once they finish that, then you ask them, we create a line on the wall. And then we tell people, okay, and then you go post there. So when they go to post there, in many cases, we tell them, post your card based on your years of experience in adult education. Because you start people from 5 to beyond 5 years of experience in adult education. And then you say there's 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 10. So then each adult, they will go to post their identity card based on the years of experience they have in adult education. So then when they post that, they talk about their names, their identity, and then who they are. So then combining this activity, they tell who they are, but in the end, they get to share something about their gender, their identity, and what they do for a living. So this is in the instruction how to do it, is also portrayed here. So then this takes 90 minutes to do it in that sense. That's why it's basically not possible to do an activity. Yeah, because they are so long to do that. So then after that, when they finish that, there's a break and they go on a break. Then we start with the first workshop. So this is where the consultation starts, because now they feel they know each other maybe from before, but now they have the ability to work together as a team. Then we divide them into 4 teams, 5 for each team. So then the first that we do, we give them card that I give them to them. But the most important is the question that we're going to ask them here on subsection number 4. We ask them, what are your learning needs? The knowledge, attitude, or competence needed to integrate interpersonal skill in adult education in your work or practices. So this is what we aim out to figure out. Question number 2, what are the existing challenges that limit your interpersonal skill while working with adult learners? And then what are the desired professional competencies that you would like to develop to better transfer interpersonal skill into adult education? So they are going to focus on these 3 questions, and then they are going to answer them. So each group is going to come up with their own questions. And this activity basically also lasts 90 minutes because they have to go through different phases, and so they can develop that. So everything is kind of said step by step into this material that we provided to the coordinator. So then we go to workshop number 2, is experimenting and practice workshop. So, and then we say the purpose of the workshop is here as well. And then we ask the parents to go back to their group, and then we give them a flip chart. Now, once you give them a flip chart, you ask the group by discovering the learning approach that they use or use integrate interpersonal skill in their adult education. So now we're going to go to the learning approach, learning activity. Then you ask them, have you ever used an approach in your education on interpersonal skill development? Some said yes, some said no, but that what was aimed to. So then we wanted to know if they have ever worked on interpersonal skills in their work from before. Then after each group finish, we provide them other questions. A, what are the appropriate learning activity that you would like to be involved in you as in this room? Because in order to create those for adult learner, we found that it's important from creating a training program and an activity. Do I find it good for me? If I was on the other end, would I be able to enjoy this activity or no? So then you ask them, which kind of activity would they like to be involved in to develop their knowledge, skills, and toward interpersonal skill development? And ask them B, what are the appropriate learning activity that you would like to develop? And then your interpersonal skills. So then you ask them the appropriate they think, and they would ask them also the appropriate learning they would like to develop that when they're working with adult learner. The first is what they want, and among adult learners as well. So, and this also lasts 90 minutes. They have to come up with those things. They have to write them down. So the final activity is what we call planning for application workshop. Basically, planning for application, now we're trying to see into the practicality of everything they said, how that can be integrated into their education program, or basically what kind of a material that we should develop and produce in order to practically integrate interpersonal skill in adult education in their youth or the adult education program. So these are the 3 workshops that we did, and we put out basically, I'm going to see, we put out, we give them only 5 questions that they shared out. And from there, then you ask them to provide those questions in the end. So I'm going to try to see if I can jump straight to what came out from this only 5 questions that we had used into that. So I'll try to go to that, and I try to change where I'm sharing now. It's this one. So I don't know if you can see a different screen now. So and then you ask them, what you ask the research was to ask them these only 5 questions. They needed knowledge, skills, attitude, and competence to integrate interpersonal skill development in adult education. The second question was existing challenges that limits adult educators' interpersonal skill while working with adult learners. Question number 3, the desired competencies that adult educators would like to develop to better transfer interpersonal adult learners. And question number 4, the knowledge gap between what they know and what they would like to know in order to better develop interpersonal skill. And then the goal in those kind of a training program that they want. So going out, what we find out, this is what we find out. I'm going to go to the last chapter. We divided into those things in 3 categories: the existing knowledge, gaps, and learning needs. So existing knowledge is what they know, what they already know. So we're going to see that we find that we end up having the topic we never thought about. Like emotional intelligence, maybe we thought about that, but dealing with the issues such as cultural differences, age gap between participants, we never thought about that. But in the greens, here there is existing, this is what they have, this is what they know. When it comes to theoretical knowledge in the subjects, we saw that they are very advanced with what you had in that room. So when you go to presentation technique and skills, they have a lot. And then you go to communication skill, they have a lot as well. When you go to digital and media literacy, they have a lot. So then the other thing was to say, okay, what do you need to learn now? If you have this knowledge already, what are you missing? So what they miss, they say classroom coordination. When you have people with diverse group, diverse background, we found that it is difficult to coordinate them. And the other thing, being empathy towards learners. And then they say, okay, what is empathy? How can I be empathy toward a person if I don't know what empathy is? And then communication and time management skills, then emotional intelligence development skills. This was something lacking. And considering physical feature of adult learners, they say dealing with conflict while working with different age of learners, considering agenda sensitive and the cultural perspective in adult learning, and then consider their needs and their social needs or their special needs. This comes to refugees that maybe have certain limitation, physical or mental. How do we work with them when they have this money? They have to be an introduction program in this way. Can I, as an adult educator, try to change that have been set by the government or the municipality? Then it becomes a challenge for them. And then strengthening cultural differences awareness level. This was a need. So it means developing a positive approach for dealing with prejudices or stereotypes in classes. And I think they say developing an appropriate presentation technique on cultural differences and considering cultural differences or social barrier among learners. And then the last one, improving skill to prepare classroom interaction. Because when we set out, we want to see how can you create diversity in a classroom. This is what we want to find out, but you can still find out other things that we never thought of before. So then this is what people needs. We try to see in their needs and let us see what they have. And we come up with these gaps here. It means we take what they need, we subtract what they know, and we left with a few things to focus on. On characteristic feature of the adult education is having impact towards learner and emotional intelligence development. That's something we need to work on. And physical feature of adult learners, they say dealing with a rising issue while working with a different age of learners. As I said before, we found that someone from 18 to 65, they go in the same class. So how do you educate these people? How do you make sure that they achieve on the same learning performance in their learning ability? And then considering gender sensitive and cultural perspective, we found out that gender and cultural differences play an important role in diversity and inclusion. Because we saw that most refugees that came to Norway, they came where they had perceived gender and sexuality that conform to their normal of their own culture. So which means they have been suppressing who they are. So when they come in Norway, they come in a kind of welcomes people from different gender perspective. So now they find themselves being also scared to express that. But now we can find someone who's 45, which means they have experience dealing with this. So they are not new to this. So we cannot teach them as you teach children. They have a wide experience to these aspects. Now on cultural differences awareness level, it's developing appropriate presentation technique on cultural differences. And then considering cultural differences and other social barrier among the learners, which means the focus on trying to say, when we're trying to develop a learning activity, to consider cultural differences. And that's where try to say, what are the social barrier among learners? There is language barrier, which was a major issue that comes to that. There's also a gender expression barrier and emotion expression barrier, which means learners have difficulties in expressing what they're feeling at that moment. And someone can portray that or see them as being rude, but that's how they express what they're feeling, because we don't know how to express those things. Maybe people are offended, but that's not their intention. And we saw that in some classes, when women speak out, and people say, okay, you cannot know that as a woman. And then in many classes, women are kind of suppressed to express their concern because they're sitting with them and they come from a Muslim country, and then come kind of limit their interaction with other people. So we saw there is many things that we come up with this research that we never thought of before. And the last one, classroom interaction, is the skill for creating opportunity to receive input and feedback from adult learners. So then it was said that in order to create, to know those barriers, those social barriers that they have, we need to get input from and feedback from the learner. That means they need to do a need assessment. They said they never do it because they use one FITO program. Each year comes a new learner, each 6 months comes a new learner. They keep taking people out, bring people in, then use the same system without asking the learner their frustration, their need, or try to say, okay, if you have different ages, how can I deal with you? How am I going to focus on that? So those are the things that we find out in that sense in this research. So if you try to go beyond everything, we try to use the language that we find among the participants. So the other challenge that we face, we ask them, if we create a manual for you, how long should it be? And they told us that, okay, we have been working maybe in adult education for the past 5, 10, 15 years. So we know a lot of things. If you send me something that is maybe 50, 100 pages, I'll not be able to read it. So there has to be more concise. I use less news language as we discuss it because we use the discussions. There's nothing that use maybe a major term that we don't know. And then that's what presented them. And after the manual, they have a good feedback because they said, this is exactly what we said. And maybe it's kind of presented in a way that has a structure. But when you go down, you're going to see that a lot of things we focus on comes on interpersonal skill awareness, to learn from learning, empowering adult learners with interpersonal skills. And when we go down, we see how to effectively transfer interpersonal skills to adult learners as well. Enhancing adult institution capacity through social research, that was something we focused on. And then when you go down, we're going to see the law of non-formal learning, interpersonal skill development. That was a concern because this never found in formal learning. So we need to find a way to integrate that. So chapter 4, that's when it comes more into technical aspects based on the voice of the adult educator we talked about, the influence of perception to the training and learning process, importance of emotional intelligence to the training and learning process. And then down there says social and gender expectation influence on the learning processes. As I say, we took a typical example for people coming from different countries, Muslim countries, for example, where women are not supposed to be in the same room as men, but yet they can be in the same room as men. So can they express their needs or no? So then we said the demands and rewards of interpersonal skill in diverse groups. So then we went down on the last chapter, we focused mostly on emotions, felt emotions, also and gender as well. Felt emotion, display emotion, and gender differences, how this affects inclusion and diversity. Because in order to create diversity and inclusion, we need to look into this element. If we do not look into these elements, we saw that we are not even creating diversity as we say it. Now we focus on intersectionality and interpersonal skill. The intersectionality means you focus on people from different gender, racial group, emotional intelligence, and then how these things comes together to create an attractive environment. Intersectionality means a person is not just based on their age or their gender. A person is more than that. It's more than their race, it's more than their gender, it's more than their capacity to learn as a learner, it's more than that, it's beyond that. And then how do we focus intersectionality and bring everything together? So then how emotions differ across culture affects the learning, which means people from different culture have different way of expressing their emotions. They might express their emotion in this way, and someone from a different country say, okay, that's offending, but this is how I express things. I'm not offending you, I'm trying to ask you questions. And then how can we bring that knowledge in a room with people from different backgrounds? How can we connect those things together? And another point that we thought it was important, it was safety and risk, working in hostility and deception in diverse groups. Also, that's something we focus on. And the last part was also try to provide activity to increase peer interaction. So as we say, the first thing was to do a research, preview, maybe focus on active peer knowledge, try to discuss and then ask the participants, or do interview with the people, and then presentation, try to be more interactive, visual presentation, media-based presentation, there's something that was important, but also the most important part is do evaluation, determine whether the learning is making an impact, or try to see whether we can improve the learning over time. So this is what I try to present to you. I think it's a lot because we were supposed to do an activity, but we cannot do it in a short time. So thank you for your for being there and listening. If you want to see this, it's on our website. If you would like to read about what we found, you just go on our website, then you go down, open educational resources.